And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, LMS features you aren't using but should be. I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Eve Finstein. Eve is the implementation manager of Cadmium's Elevate LMS solution and leads a team of project managers supporting our current and future Elevate clients. Eve, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, hi Alexis. Thank you for the nice intro. And hey everybody, welcome or hello from DC. I see a few of you are chiming into the chat with where you're based. Great to have you all with us today. So in this presentation, obviously, I'm going to be speaking with real examples about the Elevate LMS, and that's where my lovely screenshots will be from. For any of you who may be joining us today that aren't current Elevate customers, of course, the purpose of this webinar for you may be to just take some inspiration as to what is going on in the world of LMSs, features that you may have available to you in your system, or features that maybe you can bother the product manager of your system to include in potentially a future update. As I know, our product manager, Jen, always likes to hear from our current clients about features that they'd like to see us roll out. And we do hear that from you frequently. I've been working with Elevate almost since its conception, so about 7 years. And over the life of Elevate, I have seen the feature list grow and expand dramatically. So most of what we're going to be talking about today are newer features that we've launched through Elevate over the past couple years. And the good news for everyone here on the call that is currently working with Elevate is nearly all of the features that I'm going to cover, with the exception of the very last one, are free and included with your Elevate license. So these are things that hopefully you could begin to put to practice immediately if you wanted to. So going in and jumping in, here are the items we're going to be covering today. A few of these were shared with us in an education survey we did recently about features that you all were particularly interested in hearing more about, particularly these top two. And then I'm going to be rolling through some other ones. And as I mentioned, all of these features are eligible to be turned on for any of our sites. And the only one that comes with any sort of additional cost is this shared webinar at the bottom. So again, after this webinar today, if there are any of these tools that you want to use that you don't have available on your Elevate site, I have the email for our support team at the end of the presentation. And feel free to reach out to them and they can handle getting any of these turned on for you. Please ask questions throughout. I'm going to do my best to try to keep an eye on questions a little bit throughout the presentation, because I want to try to speak to the specific item you're asking questions about. But if not, I'll try to also get to as many questions as I can at the end of our program today. All right, so let's just jump right in. We have a lot to get through and we have 45 minutes, so I'm gonna work on rolling through these so we also save time for questions. So the first feature that we're going to highlight that I would say is underused, and also one that you all requested in that education survey to hear a little bit more about, is our assignment component type. So this is a component that can be added to products as a learning element as you're building out courses. What this tool allows you to do is present users with either a prompt that they're going to return a written response to, or you're asking the users to upload proof that they completed some activity, likely an activity external to Elevate. Basically, what this tool really comes down to is it's a method for your end users to share a file with you through Elevate. These two examples I've given are probably the most obvious ones, but we all know our clients tend to get very creative with how they use our tools. And certainly any use case examples I'm giving today are certainly not the only ways these could be used. So if you do get creative with these down the road, please do share them with us. We always like to have in our coffers a list of creative ways that the site is being used, probably ways we never thought of. Noted here as well, with these assignments, the idea is that they can be graded or ungraded, and I'm going to get into how that works in the next couple slides. So this is the back-end view of what it looks like to set up an assignment component. So basically, as you can see in the screenshot, you're going to be presenting the user with instructions, and then we can talk about whether this item is going to be graded or ungraded. So your options here are that the user will submit something that a human will then come into Elevate, review and issue a grade, either A through F or pass fail, or this is simply a matter of we are going to mark you as having met the requirements of this component as long as you upload something. Ideally, this will be the something that was requested, but it's always worth noting, and I do tend to remind clients that there's nothing we can do if someone uploads a picture of a cat instead of proof that they completed a particular activity. So just bear that in mind when you're choosing here. However, if this item is something that you don't want to have to come in and review yourself, it could be something that you audit every now and then rather than have to grade each assignment. Beyond that, you can state whether the users have to submit this item by a certain date. And if you are going to be grading it in those first two examples, you can specify the person, the lucky person or persons who's going to get an email when these assignments come in so they know that there are assignments in there for them to grade. This is how it looks to the user on the front end of the site. So this sits in the components area, just like any other. And you can see here, I'm being prompted to first read the instructions, and then I have the button below to submit files. And I just went ahead and opened it up too, so you can see exactly what the user will see. So they will see the actual assignment itself. And if any of you would like to make an argument for whether cats or dogs are superior, I would be very interested in seeing those talking points. Here in this example, I've specified a due date so they know when I need to receive these materials by. And then the screenshot on the right shows what the user sees when they go to upload their file. It basically looks like any other file upload tool you may come across on the internet. So again, the idea behind this is it may be a situation where you want to test knowledge, you want to test comprehension, or you want to promote the user to go out into their community and do a specific task or a specific volunteer opportunity, instead of maybe just presenting them with, your run-of-the-mill multiple choice true false quiz. It's not, of course, going to fulfill every need, but this is a way, particularly if you're thinking about expanding beyond the traditional kind of webinar, survey, certificate type product. If you're thinking about expanding your offerings to something that's a little bit more in depth and is going to take the user through a little bit more of a journey, this opportunity for them to express themselves in writing and having an admin on your end review this item and grade it and give feedback, that's a really nice way to add depth and expand the knowledge learning that's taking place through your Elevate site. All right, before we jump to the acknowledgement component, just confirming, no new questions. Hello from a slightly overcast DC. Exactly, I know, I'm in DC as well. All right, so acknowledgement component. This one is kind of a quick one in terms of the amount of time the user will spend interacting with it. But it can serve some very important purposes, particularly for sensitive materials or kind of a marquee course that you want to try to protect. Alternatively, it is an opportunity if any of your courses require some instructions, additional information before the user really dives into the course material. This component tool is a great use for either of those circumstances. So again, going to start with the back-end example, what this item looks like on the back end of the site. So here, it's a pretty straightforward one. Oops, jumped too far. It's a pretty straightforward one. So we have the text of the item you're going to have the user read. So again, this could be some kind of privacy statement or copyright statement. It could be instructions that you want the user to review before they jump in and start taking the course materials. So that will go in that text of acknowledgement area. And then you can see all the user is doing is they're going to read this and then say, okay, for the most part. But you can control kind of what those instruction language are. So you can control kind of what the user is instructed to do to open this item. And then when they indicate, yes, I've read this, you can control what that language says. So it can be slightly more scary language, if you will. If it's, for example, an important copyright statement, it could say, I have read and understand, or I affirm, or something like that. Or if you're just presenting instructions for the course, that area can kind of say something a little bit more benign, like continue. And again, this is what the user is going to see. So we can see under my assignment component, and I was kind of building out a product as I was preparing screenshots for this presentation today. I have my acknowledgement component, and the user is prompted in this case to review policy or privacy statement. And then in the acknowledgement, and it may be a little small, so apologies for that, I kind of made up a dummy privacy statement, and I had the user click a button to indicate, I understand. Now, this is not something that I would certainly recommend throwing ahead of all of your webinars. Again, I think this is probably going along with a more in-depth, more specialized course. This may be something a speaker requests of you to protect materials the speaker may be sharing, any number of reasons. But it is fairly frequently that we do get questions from our clients about, how is their content being protected as they're distributing it? And so this is certainly one of the ways that you can protect your content by asking users to agree to a policy statement before they can then move on to access the content. Looks like there's a question coming in. Can someone mass upload acknowledgement to all products? That's a great question. And that ties into a more newly released feature that I'm not highlighting in our webinar today, but it gives me a chance to talk about it. A recently released feature in Elevate is the ability to mass edit a group of products, which is excellent. You all have been asking for that for a very long time. So we're happy to be able to give that to you. So the way it works is you will create in this tool a group of products that you want to be able to edit in mass. So all products you wanted to add an acknowledgement component to, and you can through this tool mass add components to that group of products. If that maybe seems too much, or it's not all products, it's just some, I'll remind you, you also have the load from library tool with components, which provides you the ability to take a component that you've created for product A and simply import it into product B without having to create it from scratch. Yeah, thank you for that question. Okay, so the third and final component that I'm going to be highlighting, and then we'll move on to other areas of the site, is the live in-person event component. And this one is really interesting. I remember when this, when we were trying to kind of square peg, round hole this situation before we had this component type. So we were often being presented with a use case from our customers of, I have Elevate, I love Elevate, it's awesome for my webinars and my other online learning, but I have these in-person courses and I want the users to get their course materials through Elevate. I want them to register to attend through Elevate. I want to be able to issue their credits through Elevate. How do we do that? And we were kind of trying to finagle a few component types to make it work and get them their reminder emails. So finally, we just went ahead and created this component type. So the idea here is that you can use this component type within a product that will probably have some other components in it, so that should you want to, Elevate can also be your hub for courses that are where the education is taking place in person. So Elevate can still be your point of registration. It can still be your point for distributing surveys, quizzes, handouts, all that good stuff. And probably most importantly, if you are awarding continuing education credits, that can also be done through Elevate. So once again, we'll start on the back end, talk about how this component type works. Much like the other ones, it's a pretty easy setup from the back end because the instruction's taking place in person. So there's not a whole lot for us to do. You're basically going to put in any instructions the user needs. So you'll note I'm noting instructions about the event itself, parking, whether food is going to be provided, all that good stuff. Obviously, the date and time of the event. And I would say the most important tool that this component has is the ability to, after the live event, should you want to, mark attendance in Elevate. And the reason that will become really advantageous is if you are setting up a product with your live in-person component, which is a prerequisite for a quiz, which may be a prereq for a survey, which is prereq for getting your certificate, you can ensure that only users who actually attended and showed up in person are able to continue through the product. This isn't a matter of I get to register for this thing and not attend it and then go claim credit. So this is a way to ensure that you're blocking anyone who registered but didn't attend from falsely claiming attendance, and you're in control of doing that from the admin side of the site. The other nice thing about using this component type is similar to the webinar component type. You may note under the actions column, you have that same symbol that you use to schedule reminder emails as a webinar is approaching. So just like a webinar, there are reminder emails that go out as a live in-person event is approaching. And of course, just like with the webinar emails, you can fully edit those templates to include any special instructions, reminders about parking, all that good stuff. In those webinars. So Elevate can really control it all for you. And then as you can see, I've set up an example of how a product could flow. So in this case, a user has to attend the event, and attending the event unlocks my survey. And then after I've completed the survey, I receive credit for having attended this event. The credit will then live in my dashboard, and on my transcript in Elevate, you'll be able to cleanly pull reports from Elevate that's showcasing that credit. And it's really nice for your users to be able to keep all of their learning, both in person and virtual, in one place on the LMS. All right, see another question coming in. Are you able to view metrics and analytics from emails sent through Elevate? Not quite on topic, but I will answer it. The answer is not really. Not through Elevate, although I do believe, and I don't want my product manager to come through my computer and murder me, but I do believe that maybe there will at some point have that. I'm not sure. What I will say is if that is a level of insight you want, the way to get that is to set up something called SMTP integration with your Elevate site. So if you haven't already done that, you will find that under Settings, Site Setup, Email Server in your site. And this is a way to allow Elevate to send out emails through an email address that you, our client, own. And so because the emails are actually coming from your email server, you can likely work with your internal IT to provide insight into what emails are being sent through or via that email address. The alternative would be you're using an email that's on our server, and we don't have site-specific reports connected to that. But if you wanted that level of insight, right now, the SMTP integration would be the best way to get there. Can you, and I'm getting another question, can you upload the attendee list after the event? No, the way that attendance tracking works is once you've set up a live in-person event or event component for a product, if you've marked that you plan to track attendance, you'll get an additional sub-menu item in that product that will list everyone who's registered. And then after the event itself, you'll go through that list and mark attendance. You can just do that, check the box at the top and mark everyone, and then just go down and uncheck the people who didn't attend if most people did attend. Or, if it's kind of a mixed bag, you'll just go down the list and mark attendance from there. All right. Again, please continue to ask questions. And Alexis, thank you for throwing those in the chat for me. Oh, yes. And of course, this is the user-facing side. So this is what our user would see. So they can see they have an event coming up. They can see when it is, what the instructions are, and the location. And then you can see I have my survey and my certificate locked. After the event is over, if I, as the user, was marked as having attended the event, I could then proceed through those other items. Okay. So moving on, this technically is still a component-related tool, but it's not a component. This is a minor tool, but can be important, particularly if you're going to kind of take some inspiration from some of the component types we've been talking about and maybe build slightly more expansive courses that have many components in them. This is a tool that it's just a visual aid and allows you to cleanly section your product, so that users can see, here's section 1, 2, and 3, or here's intro, main, conclusion, anything like that, to make it a little cleaner for the user, a little bit more visually appealing. That's really what we're getting at here. So in your components page, when you're looking at it, on the far right, there is an add new section button. That's where you get to this tool we're talking about. And all you're doing from a practical standpoint in the back end is placing a section above the components you want included in that section. And all components below that section will be considered part of that section until another section is put in. So you can see here I've added section 1, which includes the live in-person event, and then section 2, which includes my survey and my certificate. So this is what the user is going to see. Instead of seeing, and in this example, I only had 3 components, which probably wouldn't warrant the sectioning tool normally, but let's just hypothetically pretend that this product had 10 components in it. So what I would have is a situation where a user would click that check or that plus sign next to section 1 to expand it out. And they would see all of the components that I viewed or that I put in section 1. And then they could condense it down, and then they could expand out section 2. And if there were more sections than that, they could continue through the product. The sectioning has no impact on anything else you're doing in the product with regard to prerequisites. You can have an item that's in section 1 be a prereq of an item in section 2 and so on. And you can see in the screenshot below, I've also expanded it just so you can see what that view would be for the user. And again, this is particularly advantageous if you have a very large product. So a product with 10, 12, 15, 20 components in it, just to make it a little less visually intimidating for the user. When cloning a product event in Elevate, will the sections copy over as well? That's actually an excellent question that I would say I'm fairly certain the answer to is yes, but test that because I haven't tested that in a while. There are only a few things that don't get copied over when you clone a product in Elevate. If it's a live event, that doesn't get copied over. We don't copy over SCORM because those are very large files, and we assume your intention is to not have those copy over. I would assume the sections would, and I will say that again. I'm going to qualify that I'm saying that with around 90% confidence. So please don't come at me angry if that's in fact not the case, but that's something that maybe we can look into if it's not. So test it first, but fingers crossed for our testing that will work. All right, so now we're moving on to other areas of the site. These are the next couple we're going to talk about are kind of forward-facing features that can be used in some really interesting creative ways, including a way that this item I'm going to talk about now was used that I actually only learned about this morning. I was talking to my team about some examples of a setup for a client. One of them sent me a page, and it wasn't intending to showcase this, but I saw in the sidebar they were making this client was making really creative use of the agenda widget. So I threw it in our PowerPoint last minute for what we're going to be talking about today. So this widget is the brainchild of our excellent designers, John and Parrish. You all probably don't know them, but if you have an Elevate site, they have absolutely played a role in making your site look lovely from a branding standpoint. They are our super amazing, incredibly nice designers. We're very fortunate to have them. So when COVID first hit, and we suddenly had a rush of clients that were taking all of their in-person events and making them virtual, we very quickly realized we don't have a great tool to showcase sessions that are happening in a chronological order. We had the product list widget, but it really wasn't designed to show chronological order. So for a little while there, John and Parrish were having to HTML code these agenda pages, which, as you can imagine, was a lot. So very quickly, we realized we need to make a widget for this, and now we have it, and you all get to benefit from it. And I think it's a really both visually appealing tool, but also from a functional standpoint, it's a really great tool to be using anytime you have any sort of event where you need to present things chronologically. So once again, starting with the back end. So this, again, is a widget. So this is something you would add to a page. So you'd hit your Add New Widget button, and then from your widget type options, you would choose Agenda. And we've now put them in alphabetical order for you, so you should see them pretty close to the top. And what this widget will do is it's specifically looking for products on your site that contain live in-person or web content or on-demand web content. It's not going to pull in all of your products because if this is just a enduring on-demand item, there are many other ways to showcase it. So here we're specifically thinking about often live programs. So it's going to allow you to pull in the ones that are relevant to what we're doing. And a lot of times for a conference or an event, we may see one agenda widget per page or per track or something like, or I'm sorry, one agenda widget per day or per track. They can be on one page, or you can put a few of them on the same page. And you can control what gets pulled in from the product, just like your product list widget. So are we showing title and description? Are we showing just title? Are we showing speaker information? You also have control how the date and time present. And just to show an example, I made this on our Cadmium U website with some of our past and upcoming webinars. So you can see here that each webinar has its title listed. And then on the right, because these were occurring over multiple days, I made the decision in my widget setup to not just include the time of the event, but the day of the event. If these events were all happening on the same day, I probably would have elected to just showcase the time. And then that way users can look at day one of your conference and see your full schedule in chronological order. So then the way the user will interact with this is when they want to either read more about a session or attend the session, they simply click the title and this tool expands out to show the full description as well as the action button to get into the product for that particular session. And you can see here, I'm highlighting both the description as well as the speakers for this event, in addition to, of course, the title, date, and time. There's also a fun little sideway, and this is the example I was talking about that I learned this morning. So in addition to pulling in products, the tool also does allow you just to create HTML areas. So in a version of this where either some elements or all elements, you're not pulling in product material, you're just shown a blank slate where you can type a title and description. So the use case for this in a conference could be, you have your morning sessions and then you want to note that there's a break. You don't want to have to create a product called break. So you would use this tool just to put in some text explaining, we will be taking a break. Please join us again at 1 p.m. for our afternoon sessions. What this client did was they used the agenda tool to make an FAQ section in the sidebar for one of their upcoming events, which I think is a very creative use. So in this case, they weren't pulling in any products. They were using the entire time. This is just a list of those blank HTML fields where you can type anything. And so just like with what we were looking at here, at first they all look like this, just the titles. And then as the user wishes, they can expand one of these out to read the response and then close them and then move on to the next one. Obviously, in a sidebar, this is getting a little truncated horizontally. So of course, this could also be put on a full page using a full width. But as you can see as well, when you expand it, you do see all of the text in the title, even if it's getting a little truncated above that. And I will say thank you to my colleague, Kate, for bringing this to my attention this morning. This item, I have to say a huge thank you to my colleague, Mike. So this is one of these times where, we need to check ourselves when we've been doing something for too long. Do we kind of overlook things or become complacent maybe? So I've been working with Elevate, as I said, for 7 years. I have a new member of my team. He started last August. So he's been in the job for less than a year. And during one of our office hours, a month or so ago, he was like, do you know you could do this with prepaid balances? And my answer was no, I didn't. So because I didn't know this exists, I'm assuming most of us didn't know this exists. So I wanted to highlight it in this webinar because I think in terms of a promotion, marketing, driving dollars to your site, this is a fun, creative way to do that. So I'll say, I always knew we had prepaid balances. I will give myself that. So what a prepaid balance is, it's similar to a discount code, but instead of putting the item in your cart and adding a discount code to just either make the item free or take a discounted cost off of that product, instead of doing that, you're basically crediting the user's account. You're pre-crediting it with a specific dollar value. And the part that I didn't know was that in addition to an admin granting credit, users can purchase credit, which I think there are some really interesting creative ways this could be used for promotions and to kind of get some money into your site, even if the user isn't attending an event that day. So let's talk about kind of the examples and use cases here. So if anyone is looking for this on your site, prepaid balances can be found under the users menu. And there'll be a few sub-menu items under prepaid balances. So under grant prepaid balances, that's the screenshot we're looking at now. This is kind of the traditional method. So this tool allows you to pull up a single user's account. You can pull up all members, all non-members, all of any sort of user type, or you can upload a list of some combined user type. And you can grant all of those users a prepaid balance on their site. So this may be something you're doing as a nice thing for one user. You know, maybe they purchased an event and they can't attend. And so you're going to grant them, instead of issuing them a refund, you know, like many of us do when we want to return something to the store. Sometimes the store, they don't want to give us our money back. What they'll do is they'll give us store credit. So they're hanging on to our money. This is kind of that method. So in this case, instead of refunding them, you grant them that credit to use towards the purchase of another item. In this middle one, this upload list of users, I think there could be some fun use cases for this. This could be a promotion. I'm thinking maybe memberships are up for renewal, and you can tell anyone, you know, at the end of the year, everyone who renews their membership for the 2023 year will get $100 credited to their account. And you can just import the list of users that do that into Elevate. So then this is that alternative approach that, again, was kind of a mystery to me. I'm embarrassed to admit, but I want to own up to it and have transparency and have all of you get to benefit from it. So this tool actually allows a user to pay for a balance. Now, for this to really work, the idea should be that the amount they're getting is more than they're paying to entice them to do this. So in this example I've set up, a user would pay $100 and they would get a balance of $150 credited to their account. So it's kind of spend less now to have more later. You can see here that at the bottom, most of you would be familiar with the pricing grid that shows up in products. So not only can you set a specific price that they're going to pay for this balance, you can tier it. So maybe your members pay one rate, your non-members pay a different rate, but the balance they get is the same. Or this is something you could make visible to only members. That might be a better use case here. So you could uncheck the boxes for your non-members. So only your members get to benefit from this. So then the way that you would get this up on your site is that there is a widget for prepaid pack. And that's what I'm showing here. So you would go ahead again onto a page, add this widget type, it's under the P's, and you can either show a number of different packs if you have a couple things going simultaneously. We have sites that do that. Or in this case, I just want to highlight that single summer sale pack that I have set up. Now, I noticed there was a typo in this. This should say spend 100 now, not spending, so forgive me. But this is how it would look to the user. So the user is being presented, we're having a summer sale. If you spend $100 now, you're going to get $150 credited to your account to use at any time. In this case, I set this pack to only be available through June 15th. So users had from the date I set this up last week until June 15th. So kind of this time is running out. This is a limited time offer situation. So spend now, get more later. And a question is coming in. Does Elevate communicate discounts back to the AMS? Or would that be an internal question to ask? If the price is, okay. So this is actually a really important question. Unfortunately, for any of you that are doing purchasing in your AMS, so you may be having browsing in Elevate, but then the user goes over to your AMS to purchase. This tool, unfortunately, won't be able to work for you. The idea of the prepaid balance is specifically connected to the Elevate shopping cart, as well as discount codes and those other kind of pricing related items. So apologies that I had that on the slide, but I should have highlighted it before I got someone too excited when they may not be able to use this. Yeah, unfortunately, if you're taking purchasing in your AMS, you won't be able to use this feature. If I was talking to a client today who is doing purchasing in their AMS and they're kind of rethinking it, they've had some staffing switch ups, they realize it may be more advantageous to take purchasing in the Elevate shopping cart. we don't really have a dog in that fight. We're happy to help you do whatever you want. But if you are a client that's maybe considering using the Elevate shopping cart, it's already on your site, so there's no additional fee there. Definitely do feel free to reach out, and that's something we can talk about, kind of the pros and cons with you. So if you wanted to, you could use a tool like this. Okay, so our last and final feature I'm going to hit on today, which should save about 5 minutes for questions, so we're doing great on timing, is this very exciting recently released enhancement. It was released actually in our two releases ago. We haven't, but it's only been live on the site for a little while. So this is a very exciting tool that we think will benefit a number of our clients. So here's the deal. Anyone who's already using Elevate knows that Elevate already has an integration built in with Zoom Webinar, so that if you have a Zoom Webinar account or multiple Zoom Webinar accounts, you can add them to your Elevate site in the settings area. And that allows you to use Elevate as the point of registration for these webinars. You can very easily connect a web content component to a webinar you've already set up in your Zoom account, or initiate the creation of a new webinar in your Zoom account. That's already been in place. So this is something a little different and above and beyond that. What we've done is basically in bulk acquired a group of Zoom licenses for you all to use. You're welcome. So this would be most ideal either for a client, and I've kind of listed it out, a client who doesn't currently have a Zoom webinar license at all and wants to try out running a webinar in Zoom, or maybe you have a webinar, but it's a 500 seat license and you have a program coming up that you think you may need a larger license for, a 1,000 or 3,000 seat license. You don't want to have to purchase a new license just for this one program. You can use ours instead. The other use case that we're really seeing this potentially playing a role would be an instance where you're running likely some kind of conference through Elevate, which we have a number of clients do. Many of you know you cannot run concurrent webinars in the same Zoom account. So if you were doing a virtual conference with us and you had 3 concurrent sessions for each time slot, that would necessitate 3 Zoom accounts be in play. And Zoom, unfortunately, has gotten good at catching people who were being sneaky and trying to buy a license for a month and then cancel it. They're getting better at stopping you from doing that. So this is a way that if you ever needed to, you could have access to more licenses than you own without having to actually purchase more licenses directly through Zoom. So here's how this works. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, this is the only feature I'm discussing today that does have some fees associated with it. They are usage fees. There isn't, this is not, something, major that we're trying to ding you on. We're really just kind of passing on the cost of using these to you when you need to use them. So the way this tool gets set up in the backend, and I'll show you the pricing table in just a second, because I know that is an important consideration, is, you're setting up a webinar just like any other webinar in your web content component. Under content type, you'll hit Zoom. And anyone who's done that before knows that then under the Zoom account dropdown, you'll see the accounts that you've added to Elevate, your accounts that the customer owns. Now, if you've never done this, Elevate Zoom account will be the only one you see. Or if you have added some of your own licenses, in addition to those, you'll see an option for Elevate Zoom account. And what we've done is we've pre-set up every current Elevate site with one 500 seat license, so that anyone who wants to kind of get their feet wet and try this out for one webinar already has this enabled. If you need more than one license, more than one 500 seat license, or any of the larger licenses, the 1,000 or 3,000, go ahead and reach out to us and we'll get those activated for the site. We didn't want to throw everything at you. So we're kind of doing a trial with the 500, and then we can add more. In this orange box where the text may be too small, this just warns that there is a cost for using, oh, thank you, Brian. This warns that there is a cost for using our licenses. And that last word there here is hyperlinked. That takes you to a web page that lists the pricing. So before you save this component, make sure that the pricing is going to work for you. And this page, this is also in a link that any of us can send you well in advance of setting this up. So if you need to review this with the powers that be, you can certainly do that. But here's the pricing structure. So for each of the room sizes, there is a one-time annual fee for use. So all the sites that have the 500 seat room available, you would not get dinged this $99 fee unless you actually use that room. I want to clarify that so there's no confusion there. But if you do go ahead and use it for the first time, that will trigger the fee. And then the rest of the fees are just related to length of program. So there's kind of a base fee for the first 60 minutes and then an overage fee from there in 30-minute increments. And as you can see, it's tiered based on the sizing of rooms. So like I said, if you already have your own Zoom licenses and you're happy with them and they're perfect, you're probably not gonna want or need to use this. This might just complicate things. But for anyone who either doesn't have a Zoom license, needs a bigger license for just one program or a handful of programs, or needs additional rooms because they're doing concurrent events, this might be an approach that at the end of the day is more cost beneficial than going and purchasing either a larger license or a bunch of additional licenses. So again, we're really excited to be able to offer this. This is something that was a long time in the making, and it's something we're really proud of. All right, so with that, we have a few minutes for questions. There's one that was pre-sent to me. This is, I don't see prepaid balances in my menu. Yes, it's possible, depending on when your site was built, that certain features won't be active on it. But as I said, all of them can be turned on for free. So why don't I just go ahead and leave this slide up. I've put in here the email address for our specific Elevate support group. Go ahead and shoot them an email and we can work with them to ensure that any features you need that I've gone over today that aren't active, we can get those activated.
Hey, Eve.
Hello.
That's a great web presentation. We'll say webinar. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. We have some other questions that came in the chat.
Okay.
I guess I'll start from the most recent topic you talked about. Is there an integration with Elevate for Zoom meetings?
Not presently. So all of you, well, anyone who's kind of been in the Zoom world, you know that they are separate tools. So Zoom meeting is kind of that more casual tool. Everyone kind of has the same rights versus webinar is the more formal. You have your speakers in as panelists, you have your attendees in as attendees. Zoom meeting, the integration is less necessary because everyone is using the same link. So you would just set up a web content component and include the link to the Zoom meeting right in the component. It still masks it for the user so they can't share it with someone who didn't register for your event. An integration with Zoom meeting is something we're exploring as well. Even though it is a little bit more low tech than Zoom webinar, we do want to try to get that out for you. So definitely in the back end of your site, we always post those system notifications when we release new features. So keep an eye on that. And I'll do a quick plug on this call on Thursday, 2 days from now. We are having our Elevate user group webinar where we're reviewing all of the features we released in our last development sprint. So if you haven't already, make sure you sign up for that to hear about all the fun new features we just released.
Cool. That's exciting. I'll have to be there. Some other questions. Going back to the bundling or the sections, I should say, can you have sections for a bundled package of individual products?
All right. So that's okay. So you're talking about viewing a package. So the bundling tool won't be found when you're on the product page of a package, but I would say this is probably a nice a combination between packages and one of our widget types. So what we see, and the example I'll give is a virtual conference example, but this could be applied for any type of learning. So when we are hosting virtual conferences in Elevate, we have the user register for a package so they gain access to all the products. But we don't display the products in the package. That's not the nicest visual tool. We put the products in an agenda widget, the one I showcased earlier in this session. So they're presented much more clearly. And there you can get creative with how things are sectioned out and divided. Because the user registered for the package, they have access to all those products. So it might be you set up the package just for ease of registration, but then you use either a product list widget or the agenda widget to actually showcase the products in a way that gives you more flexibility to section things out.
Got you. And staying on the sections, let me make sure there's a couple questions here.
I didn't know I really didn't think sections was going to be the most popular of all those.
Will there be a future way to nest smaller sections under larger sections? Sometimes
the nesting
modules that need to be broken out further. Yeah.
I would say not that I'm aware of. If you have a good use case, though, go ahead and send it to us. That's typically when I send an idea to my product manager, that's the first thing she responds with. What is the use case for this? So if you have an example of a time where you want to do tiers of sectioning, I can't say it'll be the most prioritized feature, but that will help us conceptualize kind of what the purpose would be behind something like this. So please email our support team. They can pass it along. If you're currently working with one of us directly, let that person know, and we can review kind of the use case you're looking at here.
Okay. Good to know. And then another question, backing up to the mark attendance option, any change that will be added to live web content components in the future?
To mark attendance. Yeah, that's interesting. Not that I'm aware of. So what I will say is that we did in a more recent release add a report that is a live web attendance report that will tell you whether a user entered the webinar or not. And of course, like anything, you can make entry into the webinar a prereq for moving on. Now, there are other tools too, and you've probably heard about this, so apologies to whomever asked if I'm telling you something you already know. There are other ways that you can do attendance check during a webinar. We have the verification code tool. There are knowledge checks that you can give, once the users viewed the webinar, that deny them the certificate if they can't pass a quiz or they don't have the code you presented during the webinar. Our ability to know how long a user was in a webinar obviously can vary, because for nearly all webinars, we're sending users away from Elevate and into another system. So Elevate loses its ability to monitor the user, which is probably a good thing. We don't want Elevate following the user into their email and YouTube and Facebook and all that. So Elevate's losing its ability to track, but at minimum, we are tracking, did they attend the webinar? And we have a report for that. And then you have those other tools you can use to add those extra layers of attendance checks, acknowledgement tools, verification codes are all good ways to do that.
Okay. And going back to the balances, if someone, we answered that one. What does reporting look like for prepaid balances being used? Does Elevate track the prepaid credit as a payment method, like how it reports if a discount code is being used?
That would have been a good thing for me to check before I did this webinar. So there are under the prepaid balances, you'll see areas where you can manage them. And so you can see which ones you've granted and how, if there is an expiration tied to them, how long they have until the balance expires and whether they've been used. Again, this is going to be another time, and my apologies, check under discount reports. I don't know if we have the prepaid balance report, but no, it's not considered necessarily a form of payment. It is an automatic credit to that account.
Okay, sounds good. And last question, going back to the Zooms, with the shared licenses, how would we access Zoom to actually set up the webinar?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you actually can't, because we own the licenses. Now, what I'll say is that we've set them up to be kind of in the exact way you would need it for all of the settings that Elevate requires to integrate a Zoom webinar with Elevate. There are a few features we've brought into Elevate, and I know there are plans to bring in more from Zoom. So right now you can schedule one of those practice sessions before the webinar starts. You can trigger the recording from Elevate, so those good things. But right, for example, adding survey questions. That's something that you can do before the webinar in the back end of Zoom that you'd have to do basically when you enter the webinar. So the plan would be, if you're using one of our licenses and you need to do something like that, just jump into the webinar a little early. But I do know from our product manager, we are working on adding more of the settings you would normally see in Zoom into Elevate. And so with that, I'll say one important note, and I apologize, I know we're a little over time, is that for your presenters, you are going to want to set up speaker bios for them in that product and go ahead and link their speaker bio to their account in Elevate. That's going to be the way they get into the webinar. I know we've talked about a lot of moving parts when it comes to these. And live webinars kind of always have that enhance a little bit of anxiety because we're dealing with live factors, as we're saying. So certainly if you kind of want a demo of this, or you want one of us to walk through it with you and really talk about all the considerations, again, please do reach out. We're happy to have those conversations.
Cool. Good to know. Thank you so much, Eve, again for this great presentation.